Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee Time Q&A. This is Pastor Steve, and I got our two regular hosts with us. We got Adam, the Mad Hatter Rastetter, on my right.
Hey guys.
And we got Noah, that barefoot dude Schaefer, on my left.
Greetings.
We are in a new location today, coming to you from Water's Edge Church. We are located here in our cafe today, where we make all that wonderful coffee for Sunday morning services. What are we drinking today, fellas? Anybody know?
Rodney said it was a mix between an Ethiopian and a Colombian.
Transcontinental
Yes.
coffee.
Yes.
It's dangerous.
Good stuff.
Let's see. Let's give it a whirl.
Right.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, I guess I was kind of fake on that. I already tried it before now. I'm sorry.
Not bad. Not bad.
good
Not
coffee.
bad.
Good. It's coffee.
It's not a pour over though. We went straight brew out of our machine over here.
Some argue
That's good
that
stuff.
drip coffee is harder to make, but it can be made more consistent. So when I go to a coffee shop, I always try their drip, because if they spend time on their drip, then they're probably spending time on their pour overs.
I try the drip because usually you can get free refills.
There you go. That also works.
Hey, before we get into our listener question today, I just want to give a shout out to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh gosh.
Representing 30 years of struggle as a fan, and finally got our first playoff win since the early 90s.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I figured I'd rock some bingo gear today.
Yeah.
We're gonna tackle a listener question today, which really is two questions in one. But go ahead and read that for us.
Here's the question. The question is, what's your opinion on the Apocrypha, and who or what is the Nephilim? Who or what the Nephilim were?
Does Adam's voice sound? He's got like a lot more bass in it today.
We're actually recording in the morning this time.
It's true.
So he's,
My voice
little
was all
froggy.
messed up. It started Saturday night. And
Little froggy.
It was worse yesterday, and
more
it's
sultry
getting a
than
little
froggy.
better today,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I like it.
Say it again. What we got?
All right, so here it is. What's your opinion on the Apocrypha, and who or what the Nephilim were? So we got two things. First, the Apocrypha,
Yep.
then we'll get into the Nephilim.
Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know what the Apocrypha is or what that's referring to, if you were to have a Catholic background, or if you were to buy a Catholic Bible, you would notice that there are more books than our typical Protestant Bibles. The Protestants accept 66 canonical books, 39 Old Testament, 27 New Testament. And the Apocrypha refer to books, usually 12, although there were more written during that period, that were written during what we call the intertestamental period, from the end of the Old Testament in terms of the Hebrew Bible. So after Malachi, then you have Matthew of the New Testament that we've accepted. And so that 400 years between there are where these books were written. Going to give any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's...
I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that.
that was out of nowhere. That's fine.
I just like to say, as far as these, I've actually not read them, but from what I understand, I think it's best to read them with discernment. There was definitely some who really felt like they were in church history. You talked about Augustine, right? Augustine gave more credibility to them than, say, Jerome. For us today, I would say read them with discernment. Don't be scared of them. Don't be like, oh, we can't read those. But at the same time, know that there are things in there that won't be consistent with biblical teachings. So there's things that we need to read those with discernment. They can be useful, but knowing they're not inerrant. Yeah.
So they weren't, to just kind of give a historical review, this was not accepted by the Jews as scripture, and that's the context they were written in by Jews in those centuries. Particularly, there's, I was just trying to think of like all of the books that are listed there. You have the Maccabean books, which are probably the most popular, most prevalent, which are useful historically to tell us sort of the history of and why Jews began to celebrate Hanukkah.
Sure.
The Maccabean revolt. That all comes from, First and Second Maccabees, which are two Apocrypha books. You have, one of them is called the Song of the Three Holy Children, which is supposed to be like a praise written by, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after the fire incident in the book of Daniel. You have First and Second Esdras. You have the Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, the Bell and the Dragon, which is an interesting one. You have Susanna, Tobit, Judith. I don't know if I named all of them, but that's most
Psalm
of
151.
them. There. Psalm 151.
Yeah.
There's an additional psalm. And so these are all books, the rest of Esther. There's additions to Esther that were in the Apocrypha. Again, written during that time, not accepted as canonical by Jews, never were part of the Hebrew Bible, but did appear in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. And because it was included in the Septuagint, there were sort of mixed feelings in the early church about it. It's very important to point out that of the 295-ish quotes of the Old Testament that we find in our New Testament, 0 of them are from the Apocrypha books. So that's really important to understand, that Jesus and his contemporaries did not accept those as Scripture. You have so many, as it was written, thus saith the Lord, pointing to and quoting from Old Testament books. None of those there's 0 quotations of the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
When you get to the early church fathers, they do quote them periodically. And that's where you see in the early church fathers' writings some differing lines of thought on it. And I mentioned Augustine, Augustine, and Jerome, who wrote the Latin Vulgate, who translated, the Bible into Latin, which became the official of, the church for a long time. He included them in the Latin Vulgate. However, he clearly noted, these are not canonical Scripture. These are useful, maybe for some history. They may be edifying in some ways to the church, but he called them books of the church, not books of Holy Scripture. That's a really important distinction. And for that reason, those reasons alone, there's no references in the New Testament as quoting them, authoritatively. There's no acceptance by Jews of them as Scripture. I think that's enough to not accept them as scripturally authoritative.
Yeah, and I would, like Adam said, feel free to read them, but with discernment. I think the Apocrypha can be great for providing context for the New Testament when it comes to especially how the Jews were expecting Jesus to appear, how are they expecting him to act. It gives a lot of reasoning for why they were expecting more of a conqueror because of some of those writings and what they experienced during that period. So super, super useful, and it gives a much better picture of what's going on in the minds of the collective minds of the Jews at the beginning of the New Testament with Jesus coming onto the scene. Yeah.
No, that's really important. Some have pointed out in the Apocrypha writings, and I've read large excerpts from most of those books. I've never read them all the way through, but I do have a strong familiarity with them. And many have pointed out sort of the tension that's held during that time period where there was all this pressure to conform to Greek culture. And some of the older Jews were trying to maintain their Jewish identity, their unique identity. And yet after Alexander the Great's conquest of, Palestine, that there is this pressure then to sort of coalesce their Jewish beliefs with Greek culture, language, etc. The Hellenization of the Jews is what that's often referred to. And so you have, sort of the old heads who are rejecting that, but you got young people that are, are just going along with the culture, wanting to fit in, wanting things to make, culturally acceptable. And from that, you get this tension of how do we maintain our Jewish identity in the face of all of this? And then you got the Maccabean revolt. All of it speaks to and kind of creates this environment in which there was this strong messianic fervor, this strong expectation of someone to come and sort of overthrow the powers over the Jews and restore them to their national prestige and prosperity, like in the days of King David. And so all of that sort of informs this. So my opinion then is these are not Scripture. Reasons to reject them as Scripture, or the Jews did not accept them as Scripture. Jesus and his contemporaries did not quote them as authoritative. Jesus spoke of the Scriptures in the Old Testament as the Psalms, the writings, the books of Moses. He called it the Law of Moses, the Psalms, and the historical books, the prophets. And so, not quoted in the New Testament, not accepted by Jews, not officially recognized as canonical Scripture by the Catholic Church until the Council of Trent, which was in the 16th century. Most believe that was a reaction to the Protestant Reformation, in which Martin Luther was calling out, the abuse, particularly the sale of indulgences, which stems from the doctrine of purgatory and the treasury of heaven, all of which there's no biblical warrant in the canonical books that we accept, but they do find their root in the Apocrypha writings. And so for the Catholic Church to preserve their teachings and methods and ways, they went ahead and accepted them as Scripture.
Okay, yeah.
That's my opinion. That's kind of my view on it.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the Apocrypha?
No.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go to the second part of that question. Probably a very interesting topic, to say the least.
Who or what were the Nephilim?
The Nephilim.
So the Nephilim, we find those in Scripture.
Yeah,
right?
We should probably read that passage.
Yeah,
Genesis 6. You got it pulled up already?
I do. If we go to Genesis 6, the first 4 verses after Genesis 5 gives a genealogy from Adam to Noah, it goes into this time before the flood, and it says, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown."
Yeah, so just from those verses, Nephilim are referenced. Mm-hmm. They're referenced as the mighty men of old, who were of renown. And it mentions specifically the sons of God coming into marrying, obviously, having children with women, the daughters of men. Yeah, the daughters of men. And so what are you guys' thoughts on this? I know there's traditionally sort of 2 lines of thought. We can maybe talk about those.
Yeah. And so sons of God, some people think is a reference to fallen angels, or Seth, right? Some people from the line of Seth. Is that right? So for me, I like to think that the sons of God are a reference to fallen angels, and the reason for that is going to the book of Job and seeing how sons of God are mentioned in the book of Job. When we look at Job chapter 1, when Satan and the sons of God, it says, come to God. It says, Job 1:6, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them." So we have the sons of God presenting themselves with Satan to God. Then a second time they come in Job chapter 2, verse 1, very similarly, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord." So this is a second time they come. So the sons of God, we know, were there. They're presenting themselves before the Lord. But interestingly, in Job 38, verses 4 through 7, we see sons of God again. And in this passage, I'm going to read Job 38, 4 through 7. "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" So when you think about this, God's talking about when he laid the foundation of the earth, creating the earth, right? And these sons of God, along with the morning stars, it says, were there shouting for joy. So it speaks to them as pre-existing the earth. Mm-hmm. So to me, if that same word, sons of God, is the same, then it has to be something that existed before man, before the earth.
Yeah. So there's direct reference to angels, at least messengers of God, being referred to as sons of God, mm-hmm. clearly in Job on those 3 occasions. Mm-hmm. Now there are references. So the other interpretation is that the sons of God refers to the line of Seth. When you read the preceding chapters to Genesis 6, when the Nephilim first are mentioned, there are the delineation between the line of Seth. This was, Adam and Eve's godly son. After Cain killed Abel, they had Seth. And there's a delineation between Seth's line, the godly line, and Cain's line, which obviously was characterized by a lot of wickedness. And so they would see the daughters of men, referring to the daughters of Cain, intermingling with the sons of God, which would be the reference to the men in the line of Seth who were godly, that there's an integration there. That's the one thought. And there's some warrant to that, in that, godly men are referred to as sons of God, or God's sons throughout there, but not the specific phrase sons of God in the way that the angels are there, which is interesting. So you do have those 2 interpretations of that.
Yeah, and then another reason I think that we're looking at fallen angels here is because the Nephilim were giants, right? If we look at Numbers, when Joshua and the 12 spies, Moses sends the 12 spies out. They go to the land of Canaan, and they find that these people who are occupying, or these beings, I don't know if you want to call them fully human or not, but in Numbers 13, 32, and 33, so they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who came from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So they're saying here there's these very large beings, right? And referring to them again as a Nephilim. So back in Genesis 6, when we read about the Nephilim, they were before the flood and they were after the flood. So that's interesting as well, and then we see the Nephilim all the way to Goliath, right? Being from Gath. Joshua 11 talks about when they went in to Canaan and were wiping out these beings, there was three places that they weren't all wiped out from, and one of those was Gath, which is where Goliath was from. So we see there were before the flood, they were after the flood, and a lot of I think people think that in order for that to have happened, one of the sons of Noah, one of their wives, must have had some kind of genetic. They were not pure in their line from the Nephilim. So all of this stems back to Genesis 3, when God makes the promise to Eve, or the prophesies that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. And so Satan's trying to thwart that plan. Satan's like, I've got to do something. So these fallen angels corrupting the genetic line.
So do you think that the fallen angels themselves, as physical beings, were intermingling with women, or do you believe, because most would associate fallen angels with demons, that they're possessing men and then marrying? That's where I would lean if you take that route versus the angels themselves, because there is also Jesus' acknowledgement that the angels neither marry nor are given in marriage. but we do know that demons can possess human beings.
Sure.
That's clearly pronounced throughout Jesus's ministry.
Yeah.
So if you take that route and reference the fallen angels as the demonic influence that takes place in this world today, Satan and his angels, then I would more lean towards the possession of human men by these demons that are then.
So the fallen angels possess the men who then.
Yeah, and something I thought about to kind of support that line of thought is examples in Scripture of angels of either sect interacting with humans. What examples of interaction do we see? We see like conversation, like eating.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's maybe like one other, but I feel like that's about it. And so this would be the situation where they're doing something outside of what we like commonly see, unless they were like actually possessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But how do you think then that they became giants?
I mean, there's really big people today.
There are.
I don't know if that speaks to any sort of genetic difference that took place because of the possession, before the conception of these children. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I want to speak to, because this actually was the early church's most predominant view of this, and the reason it was accepted more than these were men from the line of Seth, although that's a viable and quite frankly a much more clean and less bizarre interpretation. Right. But the reason it was accepted is because of how the New Testament speaks about the fallen angels. In 1 Peter 3:19, verse 20, it talks about the spirits that were in prison. So they were in chains, like in prison. It says, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, which what comes right after Genesis 6, Noah's story, the flood, the ark. Because it says they did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. Right. And then in 2 Peter 2:4, you have, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, right? So there clearly is a reference to angels who have sinned. And then in Jude 6 is probably the most telling because it mentions Sodom and Gomorrah, and it mentions sexual relations. Jude 6.
I have that.
Ahead. Yeah.
And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, so they had their position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under the gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. And I think then he links it to Sodom and Gomorrah as well in verse 7, I think. So yeah, we see the New Testament then referring to this. And then one other thing, because it's just interesting that the Bible gives these few verses on the Nephilim, but it's hard. I think it's hard for us to know exactly what was going on at that time. Jude also refers to the book of Enoch in verses 14 and 15. And so let me just read that. It was also about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly of their deeds and the ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against them. So here Jude is referring back to a book that's not part of the canon, right? The book of Enoch. Enoch being, he says, the seventh from Adam. This would have been Noah's great-grandfather. And he refers to this lengthy book of Enoch. I read it a long time ago and went back and was just kind of looking through it briefly. But Enoch just talking about filling in some of the blanks about these fallen angels. He definitely took the fallen, if we think Enoch is telling what happened, he's talking about these fallen angels. He says specifically 200 of them made this oath to one another, and they said, there's going to be great punishment upon us if we do this. And then he says, but they decide to take this oath and they do find the women attractive. And so I think those scripture speaks little. That's why, going back to the Apocrypha, the book of Enoch is not part of the Apocrypha, but it's something that can kind of fill in maybe some historical blanks. Not saying that's inerrant or anything like that.
If anything, it just gives you what at least some thoughts about
what
scripture.
What may have historically,
but it's not something we can put the authoritative weight of scripture on.
Sure. I think that the last thing that I thought about on the Nephilim is Noah, and if this was fallen angels and the humanity was being so corrupted, maybe genetically, if it was fallen angels who were doing this. When we look at Genesis chapter 6, when it talks about Noah, it says that he was righteous and blameless. I have that verse somewhere. I'll read it. Genesis 6:9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And that word blameless is the Hebrew word tamim, which can mean perfect, or it can mean perfect or complete. And a lot of translations will say blameless, pure. So it could possibly be that Noah was a righteous man. He walked with God, but pure in his genetics. Tamim, that's the same word that's used for a spotless lamb, the Passover lamb. Spotless, blameless, pure, perfect. So it's just interesting to think that it's possible that the human race was becoming so
corrupt,
genetically, like manipulated in a way to where there would have been no line for Christ to come, because if these angels had continued and corrupted all of humanity.
So you're clearly all in on this, armed and ready, fallen angels, sleeping with
I believe
women.
I mean, the more that I look at it, and the more I see scripture lining up with this.
So you're all in on it. I'm curious to where you're at.
Yeah, I honestly don't really know, because I could see both. I know a lot of.
You don't want to stand strong and say this is a first order issue. Like you have to.
Oh yeah. No, this is definitely but this is bottom tier for me. This is something that's super interesting to study, but it doesn't affect my salvation in any way. I did a good amount of reading, and there's some opinions that the scriptures referenced in 1 Peter and Jude, especially when it references like the bondage of the fallen angels. It's not like a physical bondage; it's obviously spiritual, because they're spiritual beings, and but that the bondage that God used to kind of like lock them up was the bondage of being in a like physical human line that couldn't like spread elsewhere. I thought that was interesting. Yeah. It's not an opinion, which I know is what you asked for. I thought that was cool, but yeah, I don't know. I think that if it were to be an instance of fallen angels marrying into that line, then it would have to involve some kind of human involvement. Yeah. I don't think that unphysical or non-physical beings would have relations with physical beings in that way. There would have to be some kind of a mediator, which would be like the sons of God or the line of Seth.
Yeah. So if I'm giving my kind of final opinion, like I would like to believe it's all human just because it's cleaner, like it's the line of Seth. But because of, I think where Jude takes us and the references in Peter, we know that there are angels who have sinned. Yeah. We know that, but I take more of the demonic, possession view. We know that when a demon possesses someone, they can do supernatural things, like the what's the guy that references in Jesus that cuts himself, and he's like, we know he has a superhuman strength to him. Mm-hmm. I think that because of those references, that's likely the more biblical interpretation, and certainly was one that the early church held. So interesting.
Definitely interesting. I think that it's something that is interesting to look into and read about. So I just encourage people. Hopefully you learn something, hopefully it gives you...
what do you think?
Yeah, let us know what you think. Yeah.
Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you guys so much. If you hung with us this whole time, we appreciate it for sure. These are good topics, good questions from one of the members at Water's Edge, and we were excited to kick that around today. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, I would encourage you to do so. And if you would, please comment or like this video. It'll help us get some more traction, and we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
And if you have questions, go online, WEC.LIFE, submit them. Yep. We'll see what we can do.
We may not answer anything, but we'll definitely kick it around and
talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good.
God bless you guys.
See ya.